Welcome to Tales for Fluency. Hello, everyone. Imagine being in prison for 27 years for standing up for what's right. What would you do? Would you give up, or would you keep fighting? Today, we're going to learn about a man who didn't give up. He fought for freedom and equality for all people. His name is Nelson Mandela. In this video, we'll learn about his amazing journey and how he became a symbol of hope for the world. As we tell his story, you'll also learn English. We'll practice new words and phrases together. Are you ready? Let's get started. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18th, 1918, in a small village called Mvezo in South Africa. His family was part of the Thembu people. His father was a chief, which means he was a leader in the village. Nelson's real name was Rolihlahla, but his teacher gave him the name Nelson at school. Nelson's early life was simple. He lived with his family in the village, where they followed traditional African customs. His family taught him the importance of respect and community. When Nelson was young, life in South Africa was very difficult for black people. The white government created unfair laws. These laws separated black people from white people. This unfair system was called apartheid. Nelson saw how these laws hurt his people. He felt sad and angry because his friends and family couldn't do the same things that white people could do. For example, black people couldn't vote, and they had to live in poor areas. This made Nelson want to fight for a better life for all South Africans. Nelson went to school and worked very hard. He was a good student. Even though he came from a small village, he dreamed big. He wanted to become a lawyer, which means someone who helps people in court. To do this, Nelson had to leave his village and go to the big city of Johannesburg. In Johannesburg, he worked for a lawyer's office and continued his education. It was here that Nelson learned about the struggles of his people and the unfair laws that controlled their lives. He joined a group called the African National Congress, ANC. The ANC was working to change the unfair laws. Nelson began to understand that to make real change, he had to fight against apartheid. As Nelson became more involved in the ANC, he learned that many South Africans were suffering because of apartheid. Black people couldn't go to the same schools as white people, and they couldn't live in the same neighborhoods. This made Nelson even more determined to fight for equality and justice for all people, no matter their skin color. In 1944, Nelson Mandela and some of his friends started the African National Congress Youth League. This group worked hard to make people aware of the unfair apartheid laws. Nelson believed that the government had to change. He believed in the power of peaceful protests, where people could show their anger without using violence. But as time went on, Nelson and the ANC realized that peaceful protests weren't enough. The government didn't listen to their demands. Many people were beaten, arrested, or even killed for protesting peacefully. So, in 1961, Nelson and the ANC decided to start a new form of protest. They would no longer just protest peacefully. They decided to fight back in other ways. Nelson's actions against the apartheid government led to his arrest. The government didn't want him to keep fighting, so they put him in jail. But even though Nelson was in prison, the struggle for freedom didn't stop. People around the world started to support him and the fight against apartheid. In 1962, Nelson Mandela was arrested. He was sentenced to life in prison. Nelson was sent to a small island prison called Robben Island, where he stayed for 18 years. Life in prison was very hard. He had to do difficult work, and he lived in a tiny cold cell. But Nelson never gave up. Even though he was in prison, he continued to fight for freedom. Nelson's spirit was strong. He knew that he had to stay strong for his people. In prison, he read many books and taught himself more about law and politics. He also spent time with other prisoners, teaching them and helping them stay hopeful. He believed that one day South Africa would be free. Outside of prison, many people around the world were calling for his release. People from all over the world protested, asking the government to free Nelson Mandela. But even though the government tried to keep him in prison, they could not stop the movement for freedom. Finally, in 1990, after 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela was released. His release was a turning point in the history of South Africa. Nelson Mandela became a hero to many people. He was the symbol of hope and strength for millions who wanted freedom. After being released, Nelson Mandela worked hard to bring peace to South Africa. In 1994, he became the first black president of South Africa. This was a very important moment. Nelson worked to create a country where everyone, no matter their race, could live together in peace. Nelson Mandela didn't hold on to anger or hatred. He forgave the people who put him in prison. He wanted South Africa to heal, and he wanted people to live together peacefully. He was a leader who showed the world that forgiveness and understanding are the keys to creating a better world. Nelson Mandela's life was not easy, but he never gave up. He fought against apartheid, went to prison, and became the first black president of South Africa. His story teaches us that no matter how difficult life is, we should never stop fighting for what is right. Nelson Mandela's legacy lives on today. His work for freedom and equality continues to inspire people around the world. We can learn a lot from his life. When we face challenges in our own lives, we should remember Nelson's example. Stay strong, keep fighting for justice, and always treat others with kindness and respect. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something new and feel inspired by Nelson Mandela's story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more videos. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember, we can all make a difference. Thanks for watching.